Welcome and thank you for tuning into this episode of Evidently You're Unaware. I am your host, Andrea, also known as the Successful Diva, and I'm excited to come to you with what is now the fifth installment of information regarding what the current administration and its supporters call the OBBB, or One Big, so they call it, Beautiful Bill. But before I go any further, I want to always start with thanking my frequent viewers and listeners. Thank you so much for tuning in, hanging in there, getting the information, sharing it on a weekly or everyday basis. For those who are not yet frequent viewers or listeners, be sure at the conclusion of receiving this information that you hit the subscribe button so that you are notified. Be sure you turn on your notifications so that you are aware when new content is on board and relevant, so that you too can be a change agent for what we must be aware of. No longer is it acceptable to live in ignorance. You must be aware. So let's get smarter. The OBBB is now law. So now what? Now what? What do we do now? Supporters of the OBBB want Americans to focus on the flashy, shiny diamond objects that they throw out there. They also are commonly known as those temporary benefits, those things that are here for the moment, almost like flash flooding, if you will, no pun intended, but they are here today, gone tomorrow. And these benefits, what they're trying to make you accept and get on board with, is that they are retroactive, some of them, to this current year as of January 1, 2025. But they will expire after the general election in 2028. And later, I'm going to share what the big catch is with some of the major, most critical, harmful components of the bill. When do they kick in, and why do they want it to kick in at such time? But let's talk about the shiny objects. So lots of people, supporters specifically, want you to hone in on the no tax on tips or no tax on overtime. Let me remind you, this is a temporary benefit. It has a maximum deduction of $25,000, and the no tax on your overtime, your no tax on overtime, has a max deduction of $12,500. So temporary in its form, capped in terms of the number of deductions that you can get. So this is not a permanent something. It just is what it is. Let's just get your focus on that. And for those in the industry, hooray, you'll be able to save here in the most immediate term. But then what? Then what? Both of those benefits, no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, for single filers, it phases out if your modified adjusted gross income, the MAGI or MAGI, however you pronounce it, MAGI, that modified adjusted gross income, once it reaches $150,000 for single filers, that benefit phases out, and $300,000 for joint filers. So if you're in that category, you're going to lose that benefit anyway, although temporary. Let's talk about the seniors. We all have some senior in our life, maybe over 65. I know I do. And so here we are. There's this deduction of $6,000. Seniors 65 plus with a valid Social Security number will receive this deduction of $6,000. Again, there's a phase out. If the MAGI is 70, once it reaches 75,000, that deduction is gone. It phases out. And for joint filers, 150,000. So even with the temporary benefits, there's caps, maximum amounts that you can actually deduct. And then there's a phase out should your income, adjusted income, reach certain amounts. The other shiny objects, I won't go into more detail about them, but here are some of the other shiny objects. There's an increased standard deduction. There are higher state and local deductions. You've heard this in the acronym of SALT, SALT. state and local tax deductions. And the other shining object is there are higher charitable deductions for those who do not itemize. So you'll receive or be able to deduct a higher charitable deduction amount if you are not an itemized, or you do not itemize other deductions on your taxes. So yeah, that's going to benefit some people in certain cases. But in the short term, let's look at what happens should you, in the savings that you are planning to receive on the front end, what does that mean if you're not truly saving the money that you're supposed to be saving from not paying tax on tips or tax on overtime? What about the $3 to $4 trillion? Now, these are the things that they don't want you to talk about or to realize is actually happening. What about the $3 to $4 trillion that will be added over the upcoming decade to the national debt? Supporters of this bill do not want you talking about that. They do not want you focusing on it. They do not want you to understand that your children are going to have to bear the burden and the brunt of the decisions that were made through the passing of this bill. I'm now going to go into some other things that you want to be aware of when it comes to this bill. Only Democrats, all of them in the Senate, opposed this bill. They were joined by 3 Senate Republicans. There are the names there you see: Tom Tillis, Rand Paul, Susan Collins. They all voted with the Democrats against the OBBB, but that wasn't enough. The OBBB has been signed into law. But let me talk about this area. We've talked about the flashy diamonds. Here are the bad parts. There is a delayed timeline. There's a built-in delay. There's a catch to all of it. While Americans focus on the temporary tax exemptions, all the things I just mentioned, the supporters recognize that many will never save the amount needed for the medical expenses once Medicaid benefits are reduced or eliminated. But the reality is they don't seem to care. Why? Because the brunt of the damage is scheduled to take effect after the 2026 midterm elections. And by that time, they are hoping Americans will forget, and some will, and yes, forgive, and some will. They want this to just be something, you sweep under the bridge. Cuts, transfers of wealth, accounting tricks, all of that to give these breaks to the wealthy. Some people, sadly, will do exactly that. But let's just highlight. I'm going to take a minute, won't go into detail because I know that some of you are well versed, but here are some of the things that will take effect kind of leading after the 2026 midterms and just before the 2026. Because why? They want to blame the left. They want, and I'm going to name a party, Democrats with a capital D. They want to say, oh, it's your fault that you're allowing, in this case, able-bodied Medicaid recipients without dependents to have to prove they're working, engaged in community service, or receiving work training for at least 80 hours a month to qualify for Medicaid. Those are the new Medicaid work rules that kick in December 2026, according to the Congressional Budget Office, the CBO. Able-bodied Medicaid recipients will have to prove they are working to keep that benefit. Number 2, late 2026, new food aid restrictions. Approximately 3 million Americans will lose SNAP or could lose SNAP benefits entirely. Removal of exemptions from SNAP paperwork required. Normally, veterans, the homeless, the youth aging out of foster care, there is a streamlined or either very minimal paperwork requirement for them to achieve, or I should say attain SNAP benefits. That exemption is gone. They will now have paperwork requirements. And then there's this new age for work requirements for able-bodied adults, 54 to 64. Approximately 3 million Americans could lose SNAP benefits entirely. Mid to late 2026 eliminates clean energy credits. That's the fuel vehicle refueling property credit and terminating energy efficient home credits. This is going away through the OBBB mid to late 2026. And just to close out some of the other late, or I should say right before the 2026, here are the student loan modifications where general graduate students may borrow a max of $20,500 per year, $100,000 lifetime limit. And then there are some other parameters there for law, medical, pharmacy, and veterinary students. New borrowers will only have two repayment options: fixed payment over a set period of time, or a repayment assistance program with payment based on income. This, ladies and gentlemen, is what we are facing within the OBBB. So there you have it. It is one of those things that ultimately gets under my thumbnail when we hear about the things that they're going to go out and talk about. And we need to be aware. That's what this podcast platform is for. We need to be aware. Don't follow the shiny objects. They at best are temporary, and they at worst will put you in a position that is worse than where you are today if you believe that this is going to be to your benefit. These tax deductions / transfers of wealth, all the other things that are happening are going to be devastating. And I don't mean to be doom and gloom, but that's just reality. There are professionals from the CBO and other entities who have verified this information. There are tremendous repercussions to this bill. And so, while you're out looking at the different ways that you can educate your friends and your family, please, I'll say, share this information on this podcast. Do your research. Be sure that you're in tune. If you aren't sure, ask someone who is. You can reach out to me and I'll be sure to answer those questions as well. But here's what I'm going to ask of each of you. You can feel free to share this sentiment with anyone, anybody, in your nice, loving way who still believes that they are exempt from the impact of this bill. Because I know some people think, well, I'm not on Medicaid. And you had to tune back into episode part 4, where I talk about how Medicaid will impact you, whether you're on Medicaid or not, how the reduction of Medicaid funding, let me clear myself up, how the reduction of Medicaid funding will impact you, whether you are a recipient. Be sure, if you have not listened, go back to part 4. And talk and listen in on how that will impact you. There are people that still think they are exempt from this bill and its impact, but that is not the case. Feel free to share with them that they are. And they are also not exempt from the overall abundant corruption going on through this administration. Here's the sentiment you want to share. In today's political climate, the excuse that some may give you when they say, I don't do politics, that's absurd. Feel free to tell them that. It's absurd. Because whether you or they, whether they like it or not, politics is doing you, or politics are in our lives through the people we elect. We have to make the choices to elect the people who will stand up for our best interests. Feel free, contact me at Andrea@strategicblueprint.info if you want to comment, ask a question, you got a topic you want to hear more about. Don't forget, subscribe to my YouTube channel at Evidently You're Unaware, and follow me on Blue Sky. You can find me there, Andrea, at thesuccessfuldiva.bsky.social.
Evidently, You're Unaware is a platform dedicated to shining light upon various issues, topics, circumstances, and people who influence our lives. The information provided should not be considered advice for legal, health, investments, or the endorsement of an individual or group. Neither the host nor the guest of Evidently, You're Unaware is responsible for any losses, damages, or liabilities that may arise from using the information shared within this podcast. All rights reserved. Copyright 2025. Evidently, you're unaware.